Now, with the system of generated journal entries, we have things like the subledger of all of the accounts payable or accounts receivable, and you can choose to have those auto-posted if you'd like. But it doesn't matter what type of transactions that you're tracking, whether it's an invoice, a sales, vendor payments. You can absolutely choose to add additional details or have default descriptions posted with them. We also have financial dimension sets, which allows you to create a combination of the main account and financial dimensions. And then you can order them for analyzing balances on the trial balance list page and all sorts of other various reports. Now, when you create your first financial dimension set, you're gonna have to select create balances before it can be selected for analysis. But once you have the balances created, you can use them for various reports and basically any of the inquiry screens in there. And once those balances are created, you can also update the balances, which are then going to update any records that have not been added to the balances yet, and then it'll automatically update it for you. And this is what we call a net new update. Or, if you wanted, you can rebuild the balance, which will completely clear the balance and new records, and basically recreate the balance from the beginning of time. Okay, so another key area or tool inside of Dynamics 365 Finance Operation Apps is going to be how to handle taxes. And there are only two things guaranteed in this life: death and taxes. And there are a couple of different ways that you can handle taxes inside of the finance apps. First, you have the sales tax groups. Sales tax groups are groups of sales tax codes that are attached to either your customers or your vendors. And this is going to include all sales tax codes that apply when you trade goods or services with your customers or vendors. Since the type of item that you are selling usually determines the type of taxes, you're going to need a way to calculate them for each item. So that's why we have something called item sales tax groups. And think of these as groups of sales tax codes that are attached to the resource, like a product. And when you set it up, the item sales tax group includes the sales tax codes that apply when you're selling the item. But since the item sales tax group might also include most of the sales tax codes in the system, you do have the option to create the item sales tax groups, and you can either then choose to attach them to a group of items or a single item. Now, sales tax groups are related to the party of the transaction. Think like the customer or the vendor. Whereas the item sales tax groups are related to the resources of the transaction, like the item or the procurement category. Tax groups are going to have a list of tax codes, and the tax codes are both in the sales tax group and the items tax group for that transaction. And basically, it's going to have all the tax codes that are applying to that transaction itself. But don't worry, this is not a tax accounting class, thank goodness. But I do want to go ahead and log into the system for a minute, and I want to go back to when we talked about financial dimensions and show you how to create one. Because I don't know if you noticed, it's a pretty heavy topic, and the good news is it's not that complicated to actually execute it inside of Dynamics. All right, so if you remember from part 1, I am using a lab environment that is available to you, and you can find this at aka.ms/mb920. where if we're in our finance module right now, so each of the modules in the learning path are going to have different lab environments that you could log in and play with these yourself. So again, that's aka.ms/mb920. But let's go ahead and create our financial dimension. We are using a fictional company for this. So I'm going to come over here to our left-hand side, select the navigation bar, and I'm going to come down and we are going to go to our general ledger module. Then inside of our general ledger, we are going to come to our chart of accounts, and then our financial dimensions.
So what I want to do is I want to create a new dimension. And if you remember in part 1, it's real simple. At the top of the navigation bar, select New. And now what we can do is we want to use our dimensions from, we're actually going to create a custom dimension. Now you could absolutely use ones from existing dimensions you have, but let's just call this, let's do one for our affiliate revenue. All right, then from the report column name, we'll just do it for an abbreviation for affiliate. And then everything looks good. That's all we'll have to do for now, and we'll just select activate. Now, notice that this will not run until our dimension activation run happens. Again, that's going to take a couple of minutes, and it's something that we can either do manually or have it ran automatically. So notice it's still going to be inactive until that financial dimension runs. But since my affiliate revenue dimension is set up, I could then go through and make any other changes. As far as this class goes, remember, we're not in a finance class, so we are not going to be setting all that up. But I just wanted to show you it's just a click of buttons to create that financial dimension. Okay, so we've covered how you can use the chart of accounts to provide a digestible breakdown of all of the financial transactions that your company conducted or had during a specific accounting period. But now what I want to do is take a look at the periodic financial process. Now, each organization has a different process and different steps that they need to do at the end of a period. And you can actually see some of the different steps that an organization might need to take on the screen. But inside of Dynamics 365, the financial period close workspace allows you to track all of your different financial closing processes across the different companies, the different areas, and the people's responsibilities. And depending on your view of the financial period close workspace, you can either see all the tasks and all the statuses for a specific closing schedule or just the tasks that are assigned to you. So if you actually look here on the screenshot that I have pulled up on the screen here for you, you can see what we call all of the different summary titles. And these are going to help you keep track of everything that you and your team need to complete in order to close out that period. You're also going to have tasks and the status of each section. And this is where you can see, kind of just the status and a timeline of the overall closing schedule. And you can choose to filter either by company or the person who's responsible for that task. And you can also view that when we filter those statuses, you can choose to see something that's due today or, things that are past due. And it's real simple. All you have to do is select that filter at the top of the card list. And you can also select the company filter to view the status for a specific company, especially if you have multiple. And each of these status tabs, they're going to give you a breakdown either by percentage or however you set it up. But essentially, it allows you to see what's been completed and how many tasks you still have remaining. And keep in mind, since this is fully customizable, you can base it off of your own organization's closing process. So that's the closing process, but let's actually take a look at some of the daily or monthly tasks that your accounts receivable team is going to be responsible for. So accounts receivable is basically money owed by a business to its customer, and it's shown as an asset on the company's balance sheet. So for example, let's say I'm an electric company and I bill my customers for electricity after the customer's already received it. And so they're going to get a invoice, and basically it's going to be a record on my accounts receivable until the customer pays it. So if you see here on the graphic on the screen, the accounts receivable team, or the AR team, has 5 main jobs. They first need to process any customer prepayments. So think of this as like deposits. And then after the prepayments, they're going to have to send an invoice to the customer for any remaining balances. Once the customer pays, they're going to enter that they received the payments into the system, and then they're settling all of the different invoices and payments made. Then, if it's all paid off, they'll close out the line.
However, if there's like balances due or even past due, they're going to work to collect that payment from the customer. On the other side of the table, though, we have accounts payable, or our AP team. Accounts payable is money that's owed by a business to a supplier, and it's going to be shown as a liability on the company's balance sheet or as short-term debt. So, for example, I'm a restaurant and I get a shipment of food, and I'm getting that shipment before the food has been paid for. This is then shown as a debt as part of a trade payables. So if we actually look at this process right here, or how we pay a vendor invoice, when a company orders from a vendor, there's usually some sort of purchase order request. Now, this process is going to vary from organization to organization, and it's really going to be based on your own policies. But what your accounts payable team is going to do is that they're the ones who are actually paying for the goods themselves. Remember, these can either be products or services. But what they'll do is they're going to take the invoices that they received from the vendor and they're entering it into the system. And there's a few different ways you can do it. You can use the vendor invoice register, for example, and it's going to let your team quickly enter invoices that don't reference a purchase order, so that way you can accrue all those expenses. Or, if you wanted to use the vendor invoice approval journal, you can select all the invoices and post them to the vendor balance, and you can then reverse that accrual. But essentially, once that invoice is in the system and approved, your team can then issue payment and they're closing out that line. Now, in a minute, I'm actually going to show you how you can create a vendor payment journal entry in the system. But when you are paying for a product or a service that you ordered from a vendor, you're going to need to receive and enter those invoices or generate and submit vendor payments. And then, your AP team is managing all those vendor settlements. Organizations can choose to issue prepayments, which are basically just those advanced payments to our vendors for those goods or services before they're actually fulfilled or delivered. And you absolutely could choose to use a prepayment invoicing or prepayment journal vouchers. And what we find to help minimize risk, you can track those prepayments by defining the prepayment on the purchase order. But once it's time to settle the invoice or pay it off, you can either choose to do it as a partial payment or a full payment, and this is all going to be based on the terms of your contract with your vendor. And this might be a little bit difficult to understand if you aren't familiar with the process. So what I want to do is I actually want to log back into the dynamic system, and we'll create a payment journal together.
So it's super important to make sure that you're paying your bills, and you want to make sure that your accounts payable team is all set up to pay out your vendors. So to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to create a new vendor payment journal. And in order to do that, we'll come to our accounts payable module. Then we are going to come under here to payments. And the very first one is our vendor payment journal. And guess what we're going to do now? We're going to create a new payment journal. How do we do that? Coming up here to that new taskbar. So I'm going to select new. And you can see right away, we just added a line on our journal right here. So what we can do for the name box, I'm just going to name this our VenPay, because that's the structure we have for our organization. And the description's automatically going to populate. Then on top of the lines right here, what I have is I am going to select payment proposal. All right, so now I need to put in my invoice criteria. So I want to make sure that I am paying it by due date. Now for the to and from date, you could also add in additional filters if you wanted. I'm going to just leave those blanks for today. And then if we wanted to look at any records that I wanted to conclude, like any vendor accounts or reference numbers or like the way I'm paying, I could then choose to filter on how this payment batch is going to go. But I'm not going to change that. I'm going to just click OK. And I'm going to just say I want to process all of my vendor invoice statements that currently are due. And here we go. This is pulling up all of my invoices that I'm currently due to pay. You can see that what I currently owe. And so what I can do, all I have to do is click Create Payments. And so now what I can do is I can actually select all of my vendors. And then, so these are all of the different invoices that I want to pay. But let's say, for example, you know what, I don't want to pay everything right now. I just want to pay, let's just pay these first three. So I'm going to just select threes. And then I'm going to, all right, so we have all of our payments here. And let's say that I just need to pay all of them. So to select all, going to go ahead and go to my payment option. And then this is where if I wanted to say, you know, how do I want to pay? You know, if I had any, you know, I have my electronic payment. And this is where I can include any payment IDs. And then I can actually then click Post, and all of the invoices that are due to be paid are going to be paid, and you can see what it's going to cost me and then ultimately what's going to be posted inside of the journal.
So that's how we pay our bills to our vendors. But what happens if one of our customers need to pay us? Or what if they're late on their payment? Depending on the setup of your organization or the agreement that you have with your customers, you may need to have your accounts receivable team manage the credit and collections portion. Or who knows, if you're a larger organization, you may have a completely separate collections department for this. Either way, let's go ahead and take a look at credit management. And this is actually a tool inside of Dynamics 365 Finance that allows you to set credit limits for customers. And this can either be like a long-term limit, but if needed, you can even set temporary credit limits to kind of help with different timeframes where the customer might be at a higher risk. These are all going to be great tools inside of Dynamics 365. And another one that comes to mind is the risk score. And the risk score is a great place to store key pieces of credit-related information or data about the customer. But the risk score is also what you can use to auto-generate credit limits. And even though the risk scores are not required, they can come in handy, especially when you have a lot of customer records. Because at the end of the day, you want to make sure that you're getting paid for your products and services and your customers are up to date on their accounts. However, you know, there are times where a customer may fail to pay, maybe they're late on their payments or something happens. So to help with that, Microsoft Dynamics 365 for Finance and Operations offers a really robust credit and collections management tool that allows your team to manage the entire collection management gamut, right from generating the customer account statements, from being informed of balances and when they're due, and they're getting the notifications on when collection letters should be sent to the customers. And it also can help you know when you just need to write off bad debt. And what's more, you can see the customer's calculated aged balances at any given point in time. And this can be setting up where if you want to automatically apply overdue payment charges to any past due balances, or it can actually just help anyone working on those collection activities and free up some of the resources used by site collections because you don't need them anymore. And it's really important that you have a proper collection management protocol because this will help you get your receivables collected on time. And this can help your organization manage cash flows, reduce time costs, and all the efforts that go into having to manually manage all that collections process. But, okay, so I'm looking here where we're at. All right, so we have just a few more sections to cover in this module, and I want to move on to how you can use Dynamics 365 to manage your organization's bank accounts. And it's an important part of running a company. You need to understand what your expenses are and how you can plan ahead. So in Dynamics, we have the cash and bank management module. And the cash and bank management module is really closely connected to the accounts receivable and accounts payable modules. And you can use the cash and bank management to maintain the legal entity's bank accounts and all of the financial instruments that are associated with those bank accounts. And there are going to be 4 main processes under the cash and bank management. First, you have depositing bank funds. This could include things like deposit slips, bills of exchange, promissory notes, or checks, really anything. Then you have your reconciliation of accounts. And this is where you receive a bank statement, and then you have to review each legal entity's bank transactions with the transaction of the bank statement and make sure that they match up. Third, we might have cases where you want to transfer an amount of money from one bank account into another, or maybe you need to manage letters of guarantee. This is where you have an agreement made by a bank called the guarantor, and essentially you're agreeing to pay a set amount of money to another person who's called the beneficiary. And if the bank's customer, which we call the principal, if they default on a payment or an obligation to the beneficiary, you're still safe. Now, if that happens, you may need to process a settlement. And a settlement can occur between any transaction type that affects the vendor balance or the customer balance. And these things can be like transactions like invoices, payments, credit memos, and fees. Really, any transaction that can be settled against any other transaction type. Now, that's just the management of your bank accounts. But what about how you manage your company expenses? Well, inside of Dynamics 365 Finance, you can use the expense management to create a workflow where you can store payment method information, or you can import your credit card transactions. And then you can track the money that employees are spending and when they're incurring any expenses for your company. And if you wanted to, you could define expense policies and automate the reimbursement of things like travel expenses. And one of my absolute favorite things is that the expense report entry has been redesigned to really simplify the whole expense report process, and it makes it simpler. Now, there is another instance. Let's say, for example, you have a worker who is employed by one legal entity, and they're still part of your organization, but they're doing work for another legal entity under the same umbrella. Now, there's something called the intercompany expenses that basically you can assign that employee's expenses to the legal entity for the correct balance. So no matter what type of expense that you might have to process, the expense management dashboard makes it nice and easy to really kind of walk you through that entire process. Okay. I do want to move on to the asset management tools inside of Dynamics 365 Finance. But before I can do that, I need to make sure you understand the difference between a fixed asset and a current asset. In accounting, we hear the term asset, which is basically an item or a resource that's owned by an organization, and it's supposed to provide some type of monetary benefit in the future, like things like cash flow. Fixed assets are owned by the company with the goal of a productive use by the company rather than resale. So we are expecting them to provide some sort of economic benefit for more than one accounting year, and it's kind of designed to help the business operations. Now, if you were to look at a balance sheet, the fixed assets are reported at their net book value, which is what the purchase price was, minus any type of depreciation or amortization. Think of fixed assets like land, buildings, machinery, computers, furniture, any copyright patents, software, and so on. But there's current assets, which are things like, the items that you're trying to sell or trying to consume within 1 year. And so this is usually within the company's normal operating cycle. So these are things that are acquired for the purpose of being traded. So these are things like investments, inventory, short-term loans, cash, or really anything that's a cash equivalent. So inside of Dynamics 365, you're going to have what we call the fixed asset management workspace. This workspace shows all the information that's related to the fixed assets that are entered into the system. And you'll have a summary view and an analytics view. And it's kind of similar to all the other workspaces that we looked at for the closing tasks, with the tabs like the My Work, My Summary, all of the details in those tiles. And with all of this information, you're going to be able to see about any of the assets related to the company you're currently filtered under. And what's cool, because remember, we are connected to the Power Platform, you can add analytics from Power BI, and you can have that analytics section directly connect to that Power BI workspace. And this is our final section of Module 3, the budgeting capabilities inside of Dynamics 365 Finance. Now, when it comes to budgeting, it's a pretty complex topic. There are a number of different methodologies out there that Dynamics can support. For example, when we look at different budgeting methods, you could take a zero-based budget approach. And this is actually, I would say, probably one of the most common approaches. Zero-based budgeting starts with the assumption that all department budgets are at zero and must be rebuilt from scratch. And so your managers must be able to justify every single expense. So nothing's going to be automatically okayed. Zero-based budgeting is very tight, and the goal here is to avoid any and all expenditures that are not considered absolutely essential to your company's success. This is kind of like that bottom-up budgeting, and it can be a very highly effective way, if you want to shake things up. Or, if you wanted, you could take a historical budget approach. Sometimes you might hear this referred to as incremental budgets. And this is where you're taking the actual figures from like a time period, and then you're either adding or subtracting a percentage to get this year's budget or whatever current year's budget you're working on. And it is, it's another really common method of budgeting because it's pretty simple and it's easy to understand. Incremental budgeting, this is something that you're going to want to use if, there aren't any major cost changes from year to year. But it doesn't matter what you use to create your budget. Dynamics 365 Finance's budget module can help you out. You can use things like basic budgeting to define the financial dimensions for the budgets. You can create budget models, and you can set up and use budget register entries. You can also set up optional budgeting workflows to automate the review of the budget register entries, including things like the budget transfer. So let's say, for example, if an approval is required for transferring a budget amount from one department to another, the workflow functionality can help you automatically create an approval workflow. And you can also set up budget control that can help manage some of those different financial resources through the chart of accounts, the workflows, the user groups, and all of the different source documents and journals. And after you have everything set up, you can plan, measure, manage, and forecast all of your financial resources throughout the rest of the fiscal year. But like I said, budgeting is an incredibly complex topic, and I am not teaching a budgeting bootcamp because that's not really my area of expertise. However, as we wrap up Module 3, I want to remind you that Dynamics 365 Finance is going to provide capabilities for cash and bank management, expense management, fixed asset management, and budgeting. And while you do not need to know how to complete each of these processes, you do need to be aware of the tools available inside of Dynamics 365 that can help support the process. But we have been going for a bit now. So since this is a pretty heavy topic, why don't we go ahead and take a quick stretch break before we shift gears to Dynamics 365 Commerce's module. Sound good? Okay, so I'll see you back here soon. Welcome back from break. Okay, so I know we started off today with a super heavy module. And I'll be honest with you, I am not a finance person. So that's not really a module I spend a lot of time working with inside of Dynamics 365. And I think this is a good time to point out that this is a fundamentals course. We're going to just be introducing all the different ERP modules inside of Dynamics. Typically, you wouldn't have a single person who's an expert in all of these areas. More than likely, you're going to stick with one that aligns with your department. But since this is a fundamentals course, we're just kind of doing a mini introduction to each one. But let's go ahead and we're going to just keep the ball right on rolling, and we're going to go right into Module 4, which covers the commerce tools inside of Dynamics 365. So before we get started with all of the cool features and tools inside of Dynamics, I think it's a really good idea that we understand the modern customer. Think about it. When you're making a purchase, are you doing research? Are you comparing prices and reviews to other products? I know I am. And likely your customers are doing the same thing. So as you go about creating the customer experience, or what we call the customer journey, you need to understand that customers want to feel like they are in control from start to finish. And from where they shop and how they pay, and how they're being rewarded to brand loyalty, that's all going to be part of the customer journey. And Dynamics 365 Commerce is delivering a complete omni-channel solution that unifies the back office, in-store, call center, and all of the different digital experiences as one. And this allows you to create a personalized customer journey that's going to deliver better outcomes, and it's going to increase your revenue. So the first step is to create a unified shopping experience. We have moved well beyond the traditional brick and mortar stores. And while they still exist, you're probably going to need to offer some type of online shopping, or maybe you have call centers. So let's say, for example, you want to offer like a shop and pay online, and then you get to pick up in stores. Or, you know what? You could even have them, like your customers in your store, they order online, and then it's delivered to their home. And no matter what channel you choose, they may have their own payment methods, their own delivery methods, their different price groups, income, expenses, basically everything in all these different areas, and you need a way to unify them. But that's where Dynamics 365 Commerce comes in. And it's that it gives you an all-in-one solution for your merchandising problems, your inventory, and your channel management. And it's going to give your customers an experience across all of the different touch points, and it can actually help you scale and meet the needs across both traditional and non-traditional retail channels. So I want to show you how simple it is to do. Let's say, for example, I have a store in Boston, and they have a new product coming in. Now, I have a ton of older products still sitting in the back room. And each of these channels, they can have their own payment methods, their own delivery methods, their own price groups, their own income and expense accounts, their own point of sale systems, and it's a lot. But where Dynamics 365 Commerce comes in is that it gives you an all-in-one solution for merchandising, inventory, and channel management. It's also going to give your customers an experience across all the different touch points. And it can scale to meet your needs across traditional and non-traditional retail channels. Now, I want to show you how easy this can be. So let's say, for example, I have a store in Boston and we're getting new products that are coming in. But I still have a ton of older products sitting in the back room. If I wanted to, I could set up a discount for the older product to help move it off the shelves in order to make room for the new product. But in this case, I only want that discount to apply to the store in Boston. I don't want it to interact with any of my other locations. And it's real simple to do inside of Dynamics. So let me actually log in. I'm going to show you how you can create a discount on a single product in a single location. So in order to manage our discounts, we're still going to be working in the finance and operation apps. But for the module, what we're going to do is we are going to use workspaces instead, which is different than what we've done up to this point. So in our workspaces, we want to actually come down and go to pricing and discount management. And this is actually going to show all of our active discounts that we have. But we don't have any set up at this moment, so why don't we go ahead and set up one for our Boston store. So from the discount, we have our menu right here. We're going to select new, and we're going to create a new discount. All right, so from our new discount page, we get to name it. So I'm going to name it our New Year, and I'll just say it's for our 20%. All right, the status is currently disabled, and this is the only time that you can make edits to a discount. You cannot make edits to a discount or any changes while it's in the active status. Then coming down here to our concurrency mode, this is a couple of different things that you need to keep in mind when you're choosing this. When you have multiple compounded discounts, that highest discount is always going to be calculated first. Then the second discount will be taken based off of that remaining amount. So let's say, for example, I'm buying an item for $100 and I'm offering a 40% and a 20% off. Well, I would first take the 40% off the $100, which then leaves me a remaining balance of $60. And then the additional 20% would come off, meaning that I would pay a total of $48. I don't know about you, but I used to always get that confused when I would hear like a 40 plus an additional 20. I think it'd be 60%. It's really not. It's actually like a 52% discount. Anyways, I'm going to select best price. And then on the discount count, this is going to let me see all of the different options. I am going to put it from discount. There we go. To let me know what account to pull it from. All right, and everything looks good. And then we're going to come down here to our other details. And this is where I can put in a description for this discount is. So I'm going to just say New Year discount offering 20% off. All right, so that looks good. Let's come down to our price and discount. And for the discount percentage, I'm going to put in 20. And you could also put in a quantity limit here. So if you have like a super killer discount or something like that, and you don't want someone to like completely empty out your inventory, then you can put a quantity limit here. All right, and then the validation period. We're going to keep it as a standard, but then this is where I can set the effective date. So, maybe this is our New Year sale. So I am going to maybe put this, it starts on 1/1/24, and it expires, let's say 1/31/24. All right, so that looks good, validation. And then let's come down here to our lines. And I'm going to add the products that qualify for this discount. So I'm going to add Right, so we have the ad, and I'm going to change the category to our fashion. I can just type that in, or you can use this filter. All right, so I'm going to select fashion. And that's going to apply the sale to everything in the fashion category. Now, if I actually go down here to my line details, and I can then just add a little bit more of a description, so I can say like, it's all products in the fashion category will be included in the discount. There we go. All right, so that looks good. I'm going to scroll all the way up here to the top, and then we're going to select our price groups. Now, in this case, for our price groups, so for this case, our price groups, remember, we are just applying this to our Boston stores because they're the ones with the excess inventory. We don't want this for our entire organization. So I'm going to type in Boston for this one. All right, so for our price group, I am going to apply this to my retail accounts, which includes my Boston accounts.
And then that looks good. I think everything's here, so I'm going to hit save. And once that's saved, I can go ahead and close out. And now I have my New Year discount, and I can actually change it to enabled. And once I click save, once we hit the January 1st, that discount will automatically be applied to all of the stores in Boston under that price list.
So you see, it's easy enough to manage the products that are in your store. But what about the fulfillment process? What happens when you have a customer-centric approach to shopping? How are you making sure that your customers' orders are arriving on time? Well, that's where you can leverage something called a distributed order management system, or a DOM system, DOM, depends on how you want to say it. The DOM system inside of Dynamics 365 can help optimize fulfillment so that your orders are arriving to the customers on time, but it's costing you the least amount of money. And the way that it works is that it's orchestrating this process and it's helping improve your overall supply chain. And it does this by automating several different functions like order routing. It can help with order splitting, shipping, inventory forecasting, reordering, and really the entire inventory management process. And this is important because if your customers want to buy a product from a variety of different channels, or they're bouncing back and forth between platforms, or even ordering directly online from a store and having it fulfilled at their house, they want to be able to pick a way that suits them best. And a distributed order management system is going to be designed in a way that meets the demand for the products, and it's coming from this huge industry shift that we're seeing. Omni-channel retail is really complex, and by using a distributed order management system, it unifies your business in basically this new age of commerce we're seeing. So as we kind of move along and we look at some of the different capabilities inside of Dynamics 365 Commerce, we need to look at assortments. What assortments allow you to do is basically manage product availability across all your different channels. And this is what's going to determine which products are available at specific stores or during a specific period. In the Commerce app, an assortment is a mapping of one or more channel to one or more products. So this means that the overall product mix of the channel is going to be determined by the published assortments that are assigned to that specific channel. Now, I do want to point out here that you absolutely can configure multiple active assortments per a single channel. Now, on the product side, you can include a group of products by using a product category hierarchy. And you can configure the assortments by including one or more category hierarchy nodes. Then what will happen is the assortments will include all the products that are in that category node and all of the child nodes. So if you wanted, you could use the exclude option and you could set up specific products or categories that are either excluded or included in your assortments. So if you create an assortment, let's say at the global level, you can even have channels from multiple legal entities. And this is really helpful if you have products and product categories that are included in assortments across multiple legal entities. Cuts down on a lot of that repetitive work. But let's actually go ahead and create an assortment of a bunch of related products in the system. And we'll do it for a specific channel. And let's do it so it's going to be for, let's say, our spring launch. So it's not available right away.
So we are pretty excited for our spring launch, but we want to make sure that all the products are ready to go. So to do that, we are actually going to come in to our navigation page. And instead of our workspaces here, because we were in workspaces last, we're actually going to come down to our modules. We're going to scroll down and we're going to come to our retail commerce. Then under catalogs and assortments, we are going to select our assortments. All right, so here are all of our different assortments that we already have ready to go, but we are creating one for our new spring season. So let's select new. And we have our assortment name. We'll name it our new spring season. And then we need to add our effective date. So when are these products available? Well, let's just have them at start the 1st of the new year. All right, so those will start on January 1st, and this expiration is never. So this isn't a limited edition product where it's only available for a certain point in time, but it is not available until January 1st. All right, so I'm gonna come down here to my commerce channels. And I am going to add a new line for our organization. And I am going to select, I'm going to come up here and I'm going to do retail stores by type with Fabricam. And then I am going to actually add all of my retail stores. So I'm going to select all, and I'm going to move them all over. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually select the entire Contoso retail hierarchy. So when I scooch that over here and select it to add, it's going to add everything that falls under that hierarchy right there. But of course, if you wanted to select specific ones, you could. Let's say, for example, I can add just my mall. So if I didn't want to add everyone, I could just have it impact my mall ones. So let's actually just apply our spring new season. This is only going to affect our malls, Atlanta, Houston, San Francisco, and San Jose. It won't come into our online store or our call center. I'm going to click OK. And now I can see that that has been added. All right, so I'm going to now scroll down, select my products, and I'm going to select Add Line. Pick the category of the products that we are including in this launch. It's going to be for our baseball line. So I'm going to select baseball. And so right now, you see this line type right here. It's including everything in that baseball category. But let's say, for example, I wanted to exclude everything from our adult baseball line. So I can actually come in here and say I'm excluding my adult baseball infield products. And then if I wanted to add or remove anything else that might be included inside of this new launch, I can go ahead and click Save. And then once it's saved, I can actually publish this. And it'll say, are you sure you want to publish it? Yes, I am. And now, when our new season starts on the 1st of January, all of our retail stores will automatically get this new product launch.
Alrighty, we have just a few more topics that we want to cover here in Module 4. And honestly, that's the nice thing about this session. We hit you with the hard stuff early on when you're awake, and then we kind of get to cruise through the last few modules. Anyhow, let's go ahead and talk about our customers for a moment. We want to keep our customers happy. We want them to order the way they want, but we also want them to feel valued. And one of the ways you can do that is through a customer loyalty program. And lucky for us, Commerce offers a simple loyalty program that can be used across all your legal entities and all your commerce channels. So whether it's a point system or maybe you're linking it to other system programs, you can easily set up one for your customers. And this can actually help your staff build a trusted relationship with your customers. So they know things like their shopping preferences, or they can make different recommendations for them. And that actually leads me right into our next tool inside of Dynamics 365 for Commerce, is the Dynamics 365 Customer Insights. The way that this works is Dynamics 365 Customer Insights, it's collecting and combining data about your customers from all sorts of different systems, including some of our non-Dynamics 365 applications. Basically, anywhere they interact with your brand, that data is all going to be aggregated into a single view of your customers, all in real time, so you have real-time insights about your customers. Pretty cool, right? So this is a great way for your team to know what their customers want, their birthdays, and it links well with the customer loyalty. But last section kind of that I want to talk about is fraud and the tools inside of Dynamics 365 that are designed to protect both you and your customers. And here at Microsoft, we have years of experience protecting our own e-commerce business from fraud. And as a result, we've developed a pretty sophisticated technology stack that uses connected big data from across all our different lines of business. We then created an artificial intelligence, or AI, to help correct decisions in real time on whether there is a legitimate transaction or if it's potentially a fraudulent one. And when it comes to fraud and abuse, since we're pretty much living in a digital world, it can come in so many different forms. Maybe you have someone trying to force your way into an account with what we call a brute force attack. Or, while that may be kind of an old way of, fraud, in today's digital world, we're finding that fraudsters are using way more sophisticated technology. So they're doing things like phishing emails, and basically this is a deceptive email message or a copycat URL address. And what it's trying to do is trick your users into giving out personal or confidential information. And no matter what type of attack you might be experiencing, it can lead to some type of loss, whether it's financial or non-financial, like customer trust. And so Microsoft Dynamics 365 fraud protection is giving your organization the capability to assess whether attempts, that are created or people trying to get into the account, making sure whether they are fraudulent or actual logins. And these risk assessments inside of fraud protection can be used by the customer to block or challenge suspicious attempts to create those new or fake accounts. And it can actually help reduce any compromised accounts. Now, while it is slightly annoying that, every time you log in, you may have to verify yourself, honestly, the way that I look at it, it is way better than losing out on money or having your account information potentially attacked and then used in other fraudulent areas. But remember how I said that we use AI to detect fraud? Well, it's doing so much more than that. The AI technology is continuously learning and adapting to evolving fraud patterns. And this adaptive AI is used to analyze historical data. It's identifying patterns of all the anomalies, and it's looking to help recognize them. And so this makes it so if your store managers or if you have a fraud department, they can use these reports to look for trends of let's say things like fraudulent returns or fraudulent accounts. And at the end of the day, our goal here is to help you protect your inventory, your bottom line, and your customer reputation. But that actually wraps us up for Module 4 on Dynamics 365 Commerce. I know that this has been shorter than our earlier module, but we really only scratched the surface on the capabilities inside of Dynamics. So if you did want to check out that sandbox environment or try out some of these tools for yourself, be sure to bookmark that learning path at aka.ms/MB920. But we have 2 short modules left in our session today, and when we get back, we'll close out the day with human resources and project operation modules inside of Dynamics 365. So I'll see you back here in 10. back from break. We are almost done with our second session in this virtual training day. And there's light at the end of the tunnel, and we only have 2 little modules left to go. So shall we just jump right in? I think so. Okay, so Module 5 is all about the human resource capabilities inside of Dynamics 365. Now, as someone who has seen some of the behind-the-scenes action of the HR world, let me tell you, there is a lot going on. It's so much more than planning the holiday party. It's about managing compensation, the benefits, employee performance, and ensuring that the organization's programs meet the changing global regulation and compliance needs. So after this module, I hope you have a better appreciation for your HR team. But let's go ahead and look at the HR management inside of Dynamics 365. What it does is it's going to provide a complete solution for human resource management professionals. It can help with the entire employee lifecycle from recruiting, employee administration, to talent management. And part of the reason so many organizations is it allows your HR professionals to be more strategic. It's providing them with the workforce insights that they need to build better organization structures. They can build better compensation plans, because who doesn't like money, and build better benefit plans. It can also help them with managing tasks like leave of absence, as well as any type of compliance needs. Plus, your employees and managers have self-service portals for things like performance and time off. The human resource module, it allows you to centralize your people data and build an HR ecosystem. And remember the Dataverse? Well, by using the Power Platform, you can create workflows to improve existing business processes. So I think before we get into the tools that your HR team will be using the most, let's talk about one of the features that I think they are going to love. Because if you didn't already know, your HR team has a lot on their plate. And they don't necessarily have the bandwidth to answer questions regarding time off or any type of address updates when you move. But the good news is that you can leverage the self-service portal inside of Dynamics 365 for both your managers and your employees. And you can make it so employees can manage profile updates and view their training and performance. And if they want, they can submit time off requests and so much more. And what's nice is this is going to free up your HR manager's time and allow them to focus on analyzing, the overall team performance to help optimize your team's impact and address any type of immediate concerns. But kind of switching gears from the self-service into another area that's really important, and that's compliance, because that is a huge part of your HR's responsibilities. Because did you know that there are over 220 updates from over 1,000 different regulatory bodies published every single day? So if you're curious what that looks like, that's one every 6.5 minutes. So how on earth are you supposed to keep up with it? Well, one of the ways that you can do it is by using the Compliance Manager. And it's designed in a way to help simplify and still meet all of the policy and regulatory compliance things out there. But more importantly, it's going to help reduce your company's risks. And the way that it works is it uses continuous assessments, and it's automatically detecting and monitoring your system settings, and it makes different recommendations that can help you reduce risks, but it also provides the step-by-step guidance. And the best part? Each of those steps and actions are explained in like a non-lawyery language. So you can create a customized dashboard that has a baseline, and it's going to be based on requirements from like ISO, NSIT, GDPR, and you can even add your own requirements for your own organization. But the Compliance Manager is going to help find areas of improvement and help you prioritize those actions based on the risk impact they have. And as you take those recommended actions, and you're going to have this compliance score, and so the more actions you take, that score is just going to go up. And what I like is even if you aren't a compliance expert or a lawyer, you can use this tool to help reduce the risk that your organization might have. But like I said, HR is responsible for a lot, and compliance is only one piece. So I want to talk about the performance management aspect of Dynamics 365 Human Resources. Now, when it comes to building a high-performing team, that's the dream of every manager, HR manager, and really any leader in an organization. And with Dynamics 365 HR management, your managers are going to have the tools to measure the performance of their teams. And they have access to real-time organizational data, as well as the ability to track their progress and all of the accomplishments on their team. And this can be particularly helpful when it comes to identifying problems and then taking those actions to optimize your team. Now, the performance management module supports the whole process for structured development of your employees. It starts right from the developmental needs to the goals, to the training, reviews, right up to any type of achievement-based compensation. And the performance management process allows employees to discuss and document performance with their manager, who then can provide additional feedback and additional guidance. But there is one last section I want to talk about inside of Dynamics 365 Human Resource, and that's the link between it and LinkedIn. Now, I want to specifically discuss how the applicant tracking system called LinkedIn Hub can help you with your recruitment process. Applicant tracking systems, or ATSs, help companies streamline their end-to-end hiring and recruitment process. And an ATS can handle everything from candidate screening to interview scheduling, reference checks, and administering new hire documentation. But once a candidate is hired, they need to be entered into the HR system. However, instead of having to manually create the new employee into Dynamics, you can integrate Talent Hub and Dynamics 365. And by integrating Microsoft Dynamics 365 Human Resources with LinkedIn Talent Hub, you can easily create employee records in Human Resources for those applicants who've been hired for a position. So no matter really what stage your staff and your organization are in, Dynamics 365 Human Resources has a way to support them. From hiring in LinkedIn Talent Hub to talent management and self-service, everything is in Dynamics 365 Human Resources. And this is a super light introduction into the capabilities. My recommendation to you is, if you are interested in learning more, check out the summary pages in the learning path for this module at aka.ms/mb920, because there are some really great links to additional documentation and some really cool videos on showing you how these features work. However, if you don't plan on working with these tools yourself and you're just taking the MB920 exam, just be aware of the tools that are available for each process. But okay then, we have just one module to go, so let's go ahead and roll right into Module 6. And for our last module a day, we'll be looking at the project lifecycle and the tools to support it inside of the Dynamics 365 Project Operations module. Up to this point, we've looked at the supply chain, finance, and commerce modules, but we were focused on product and service-based companies. What if you are a project-based company? There are different processes for billing and different ways to manage your deliverables for each. So what we'll be exploring and wrapping up our day is looking at the project lifecycle. So first, most important thing is I want to make sure you understand the difference between a product service-based company and a project-based company. A product service-based company may be something like a car repair shop that provides the parts and the services to repair your car. But a project-based company is a company who may be building out something like a whole highway that the cars are driving on. A product service-based company is selling a service that makes a specific product that they sell or a solution to a problem, where a project-based company is creating a solution based off of multiple products, and then they're kind of selling it almost as a package solution. Now, project-based companies have challenges that typically don't apply to those product-based sales companies, And in most cases, project-based organizations, you need a way to manage both labor and materials. Microsoft Dynamics 365 Project Operation is connecting sales, resourcing, project management, and finance into a single application to help you win more deals, accelerate your project delivery timeline, and at the end of the day, maximize profitability. Now, regardless of the industry, these projects are going to involve resources, schedules, and costs. So the project management and accounting functionality inside of Dynamics 365 Project Operations can help with the planning, execution, and the analysis of all of these different projects. So let's go ahead and look at the project lifecycle. And as you can guess, by now, based off of some of the other life cycles and processes we've looked at in this virtual training, they may vary slightly from industry to industry. But really, as a whole, we can break down the life cycle for projects into 4 different phases. You have the sales phase, the initiation phase, the execution phase, and the analysis phase. So let's start with the first phase, sales. This is where you are providing a quote for the items or the services that your organization is going to provide. And this is also where you are going to have your contracted rates and your agreements. And we looked at discounts. If there's any added discounts, those are going to be here. It is important, and I want to point this out, is that quote may change from the final invoice, because there may be changes to the scope of the project or any type of surcharges. But until your customer accepts the contract, nothing's binding up to this point. Only when that customer accepts that contract or that quote is where you move on to that initiation phase. In this phase, your project managers are defining like a roadmap, basically on a successful progression of the project. And honestly, this is probably one of the most time-consuming phases. Your project managers are going to break up the project into smaller, kind of like more manageable tasks, and they're going to then be building out the teams and assigning all the different roles and responsibilities. They're going to have a project timeline and basically determine all of the project's goals. And a lot of people, when we look at the project lifecycle, they consider the initiation phase of the project kind of the most important step, because if you don't have the proper initiation measures, the projects are likely to fail or go off track. That's where I like to think of the saying of failure to plan is a plan to fail. But once you have your plan in place, you move on to execution. In this phase, the plan that you developed is put into action. So once the workflow has been established, your project managers are going to basically direct the execution of the project. So they're going to make sure that the project is moving on track by, holding things like status check meetings, or they may make changes to the timelines according to different requirements. But they're going to be communicating with everyone involved in the project. So this could include things like other team members or the stakeholders. Now, the execution phase is usually the busiest of all the different lifecycle phases because this is where the work is getting done. But the final step, you move into analyze. In this phase, the project managers, kind of finalize everything and then hand over the project deliverables to the client or the stakeholder. They're going to prepare a really thorough project report to review the work that was done, and then any resources that were brought in to work on it are going to be released, and the contract's going to be closed out. The project managers are going to work with the back office to review things like project documentation and ensure that everyone that was involved is receiving what they were promised, so everyone's getting paid. But for the rest of the time today, what I want to look at is the different parts of the life cycle inside of Dynamics 365 Project Operations. And that starts off with creating a project. Now, you can create 6 different types of projects inside of Project Operations. Now, each project type is set up differently for the costs and the different revenue. Now, the project type that you choose depends on the purpose of the project. So the first most common type is going to be time and material. All the time, the costs, expenses, items, fees, basically anything that's booked against the project is going to be billed directly back to the customer. Time and material projects are generally used for like larger projects when you don't have like a firmly defined scope. And it gives you a little bit more flexibility of billing and timing. Like an example of this might be like professional services or construction projects. Next, what we have is fixed price. Fixed projects are usually used for things like government projects or anything else that you have a really tightly defined statement of work where those costs, they're already known. But then, another type of project type that we have is cost projects. This can either be internal, meaning that they aren't billable, or an external, where they are billable. So like an example of an external project is if you have an item that's being sold to a customer from this project. Now, these items can already be in inventory or are going to be produced as part of the project. But if it's an internal project, if you do need to track any costs or items, you can track them against the project, but they are not going to be billed to a customer. And the customer isn't immediately purchasing any item here. Usually these items, they will be purchased, but they're kind of being done in the future. So they are going to generate revenue. But if you wanted, kind of looping back to our finance module earlier today, you absolutely could track the revenue from the project through a financial dimension. But the project invoices, they're never going to be created for a cost project. So, an example of a cost project, let's say, for example, if we're creating a video game that's going to be available for purchase later. But that is our cost projects. With internal projects, these are going to be projects that are not billed to a customer. So even though we're still tracking all the time and all the costs, this is going to basically allow us to determine whether or not that project was profitable based off of any revenue that was generated. But with internal projects, we're not billing a customer. So when we look at both cost and internal projects, they're pretty similar because they can be used for internal purposes. And the last one that we have is time. So these type of projects this is where we're only tracking the time and we don't have any costs hitting the ledger. So with this project type, we would be used, let's say for tracking workers who are not working on a billable project, but we still need to track their time. So let's say, for example, if we have an employee who's taking vacation or if they're sick, we need to track their time for employee utilization. But they're not necessarily working on a billable project. So since their utilization needs to be tracked, we can use this for, if we needed to pull out resources for another project. And so when employees are booking time to this non-billable project, they're going to appear as utilized, so that way you don't have to worry about overbooking them for other projects. Now, no matter what type of project you're creating, actually minus internal or time projects, you're going to be negotiating a contract. And when you negotiate a project contract with a customer, you define how and when you can invoice the customer for the work that you do. And after you set up the project contract and the project itself, this is where you can set up the billing rules for that project. Now, when it does come time for you to invoice the customer, the amount to invoice for the project is going to be based on the billing rules, and the project invoice proposal is going to be generated. So let's say, for example, I offer a training to a customer, and they agreed to book me for 5 trainings for a total cost of $10,000 per session. Hey, it's my fictional scenario, so I can pretend I'm making the big bucks. But anyways, after I finish a session, I'm going to send a customer an invoice. And I can set up billing rules for something like a unit is a single training session. And the unit price is $10,000. And so the contract is a total of 5 units. And so if I then invoice after the first session, I would be invoicing for 1 unit at $10,000. Now, for this next kind of session in Module 6, I do want to explore the tools that can specifically assist with the execution phase of the project. And when you get to that phase, oftentimes project managers are going to break down that project into mini milestones. we have a tool inside of Dynamics called the Work Breakdown Structure, or WBS. This is a tool that's integrating the scope, the cost, and the schedule baselines, and it basically ensures that the project plans are all in alignment. And you can use WBS templates to create standard templates for projects. So let's say you have a project that you're offering quite a bit, and it has a lot of repeatable work. You can create a WBS template that makes it really simple to move from another project to another one. So, if you have a template from an existing project, all of that knowledge and best practices that you gathered during the planning portion of the project, it's really simple to reuse it on similar projects in the future. Now, earlier in our module, we covered finance briefly, and we kind of talked about budgets. And I told you, it was a pretty complex area. And the same is true with project budgeting as well. So we don't get into all the details, but I want to share 2 different ways to manage and control your projects. And that's going to be through project forecasts and project budgets. Now, you would use a project forecasting if your organization has like an operational perspective. So if you're going to be focused on revenue and costs from specific transactions, this is going to be the right approach for you. On the other hand, you should use something called project budgeting if you're going to be more focused on the financial amounts. Either way, both project forecasts and project budgets use the forecast model to hold the projected transaction amounts. So when you use project forecasting, you can either enter forecast transactions in the forecast forms for each and every transaction type. So that means that every available attribute is available for an actual transaction, can also be used in the forecast transaction. So think of things like this, like for line profitability, line attributes, workers, or descriptions. And you can also project how long after you incur a cost you will invoice a customer. Project forecasting transactions are going to be based off of units and amounts, whereas with project budgeting, it's kind of a simpler method than forecasting, although it does integrate with the forecast modules. It uses a single entry form for the original budget details and all the revisions, and that allows for projections that are based only on the amount or the category or an activity. In project budgeting, all original budgets and revisions have to be sent to a project workflow for approval. And workflows are going to give you an increased control over the process and can create a change history record. But there is one very important piece of the budget or any project planning that we haven't talked about yet: how you're going to get paid. So when you select your project type, time and material or fixed project, that's going to determine how you invoice for your project. So before you create a customer invoice for a project, you can actually create a preliminary invoice, or what's called an invoice proposal. Now, in this invoice proposal, you can select project transactions to include. So you can actually review the invoice and all of those details before you post the invoice and send it off to the customer. So there's a couple of different things that you might want to include on your invoice. So you might want to include things like the billing schedule. And this is actually one of the terms of basically all the different milestones for the project. And these were things that you came up with in that sales phase. But for each milestone, you can define things like a specific date, sales currency, the sales price, or an activity. So think of it like this. You create an invoice and, they had to pay 20% of the total cost of the project up front as a deposit. But then you're creating an invoice for that halfway point, and now they have to pay 30%. Then at the end of the project, they have to pay the remaining balance on delivery. So you can use the invoice to control and track both invoiced and non-invoiced transactions. And you can use that to analyze all of the different transactions against the quotes, and it gives you a bird's eye view of your projects from the quote stage to the completion. And then you can kind of dig in a little bit more and see which transactions have been charged, whether it's to a specific project, and which lines have been invoiced. And if you wanted to, you could dig in and view each individual transaction. So if you needed to, you can make adjustments to them after they're posted. And last thing I want to talk about is I want to share inside of the project operations app is we have something called the schedule management tool. Now, one of the biggest challenges for a project manager and your resource managers is trying to make sure that they have the right resources for the project. And inside of Dynamics 365 project operations, you can schedule worker resources based on requirements and the schedule of the project, or you can base the schedule off of skills and availability of the workers. Now, this makes it so you can deploy workers efficiently and effectively. Plus, with the scheduling tool, you can quickly find the most qualified workers who are available to work on your project. And there's different ways to see how you can use those workers more effectively during the project itself. Now, each worker can have a unique calendar setup that's going to dictate, the working hours which they can be scheduled for each project. And this can make your worker's life and your project manager's life way easier. But, what you can see kind of through here is that a project has so many moving pieces, throughout its life cycle. And honestly, what we've covered today doesn't even begin to cover it. And so if you are interested in learning more, some of our different functional consultant certificates go into way more detail on this material. And then there's labs that you can play around in and work with the system itself. But since this is a fundamentals course, I need to keep kind of everything at that high level because I don't know about you, but we covered a ton of information in these 2 sessions. From supply chain, commerce, operations, finance, human resources, and even projects, this ERP side of Dynamics 365 is pretty dang impressive. However, with that being said, we're at the end of our module and at the end of our session today. So I hope that you found this helpful. I hope that you were able to take away a nugget of new information that will help you back in your daily job. But since you've already dedicated the time to attend both sessions for this class, I'd highly recommend that you take a stab at the MB 920 exam. It covers all the same information that we reviewed over these past 2 sessions. And since it's a fundamentals course, you really only need to focus on identifying and describing the different components of the finance and operation apps inside of Dynamics 365. And in my opinion, between this course and the learning path at aka.ms/MB920, you have everything you need to successfully pass the exam. Now, if you're wondering, as for the exam itself, you can expect right around 40 questions, give or take a few. And in order to pass, you're going to need to score a minimum of 700 out of 1,000 points. Now, the way that you earn points is by answering questions correctly. You do not lose points for incorrect answers. So my best piece of advice for you if you're taking the exam is to make sure that you are reading the question all the way through and reading all the answers before choosing. And if you don't know the answer, just take your best guess. You're not going to lose any points. And as far as time goes, you have 45 minutes to take the exam itself. So you don't really need to rush through. There's no labs on the exam, and all the questions are going to be focused around the concepts we discussed. And you're going to see question types like multiple choice questions, true, false, matching, fill in the blank, but it's going to be from a word bank. But since it's fundamentals, everything stays super high level. I think that's pretty much everything that you need to know about the exam. Again, review any areas that you might be unsure about with the learning path. And again, that's at aka.ms/MB920. And once you pass your exam, make sure you share that shiny new badge on your LinkedIn page so we can all celebrate with you. Good luck on your exam if you're planning on taking it, and I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. Hopefully we'll be celebrating your new badge or see you in another class soon. Bye, everyone.